Hello everyone and welcome to Book Bubble. My name is Anne. I'll be your host today. I work as a librarian for Arlington Public Library, and today I want to tell you a story called The Persian Cinderella. We also have some puppets to help us tell the story, and afterwards we'll go behind the scenes and talk to the puppeteer. All of this and more coming up on Book Bubble. The story we're hearing today is called The Persian Cinderella. Persia is the ancient name for the country of Iran. Let me show you on the globe where we can find Iran. First, we'll look for Arlington, right there. We go across the Atlantic Ocean, and we hit Iran. The outfit I'm wearing is also from my friend who is from Iran. She wanted you to be able to see what women in her country wear. Now let's move on to the story. Long ago, when Persia was a land of princes and palaces, poets and dreamers, there lived a girl named Sitara. She was called Sitara, which means star, because of a mark on her cheek in the shape of a star. Sitara had never known her mother, who died when she was very small. Her father was busy with his own affairs, so although she lived in the women's part of the house with her stepmother, aunts, cousins, and stepsisters, she was often very lonely. The other women were jealous of Sitara's beauty, her long black hair, delicate eyes, tiny feet. They made her wear cast-off clothes, only gave her leftovers to eat, and ignored her as much as they could. When they did pay attention to her, it was only to tease her about the star on her cheek. They would taunt her and laugh cruelly, and so she ran to the fountain to try and wash off the mark. One morning, Sitara's father visited the women, and he had some very important news. The prince has invited us all to his palace for the new year, Nowruz, he said. Everyone must be dressed in their finest. Here's a gold coin for each of you. Tomorrow you shall go to the bazaar and buy fabric to make new dresses. Choose wisely. The next day, all the women, young and old, covered their heads and faces with veils so that no stranger might look on their faces, and they ventured out to the bazaar. There were shops selling everything you can imagine, and the place was crowded with people and animals. Sitara saw carpets, jewels, pearls, silks, and perfumed oils as she listened to the shouts of the sellers enticing customers over to their stalls. She could also smell delicious spices and treats. When she saw a peddler stirring spiced nuts over a fire, she held out her gold coin. He gave her a paper of wrapped almonds and some silver coins in return. Sitara finished the nuts in 2 mouthfuls and continued through the bazaar. I can still buy cloth with my coin, she thought. As she walked, an old woman in rags came up to her. Spare a coin, please, pretty girl, she said. She needs new clothes much more than I do, Sitara thought, and handed her one of the silver coins. May good fortune come to you, the old woman cried. Looking down, Sitara realized that she only had 2 coins left. She began to look for a stall where she could at least buy a new sash or scarf, but then she came to a pottery stall where a little blue jar was sitting on a shelf. The pot was dusty and cracked, but it was glazed bright blue, and Sitara could not take her eyes off it. How much is this? She asked the seller. I only have a few coins left. The seller hesitated. It is worth much, he said, but he took her last 2 coins and sold it to her. Sitara's family could not believe what she had bought with her gold coins. Are you going to wear that to Nowruz? They sneered at her. A dusty, cracked pot? It is unlucky not to have new clothes for the new year. You will disgrace us at the palace. The next day, all the other women were busy measuring and cutting the fabric they had bought, making their new dresses for the party. Sitara sat alone in the garden with her new jar. I don't care if you are dusty and old, she whispered, stroking it with a gentle hand, but I do wish that you were filled with jasmine blossoms. Immediately she smelled the sweet scent of the flowers and saw that the jar was overflowing with jasmine blossoms. Magic, Sitara gasped. Perhaps there is a pari, a good fairy, inside this jar. I wonder, little jar, I am so hungry. And all of a sudden, a dish of figs and apricots appeared before Sitara. Little jar, I am so cold in this winter wind. And all of a sudden, a shawl was wrapped around Sitara's shoulders. It is true. Oh, good Pari, thank you so much for my gifts. I will keep you a secret and never tell anyone. On the night of Nowruz, Sitara's stepsisters, aunts, and cousins gathered in their new finery to leave for the palace. They laughed at Sitara, sitting in a corner with her little jar in her hand. After they had gone, Sitara looked at the pot and said, "Would you kindly give me a dress and veil for Nowruz?" She crossed the courtyard, and by the time she reached the door, her old clothes had disappeared, and she was wearing the most beautiful gown. The veil on her head was made of the finest silk, and there were 2 diamond anklets sparkling on her slender ankles. Sitara left the house quietly and ran through the empty streets to the palace. As she climbed the marble steps to the entrance, she marveled at the beautiful towers and the windows full of lights. She caught sight of a young man at one of the windows. He was very handsome and stared boldly back at her. The prince may be royal, Sitara thought, but I would dance over all the 7 seas for that man in the window. When she entered the palace, she found herself in a huge banquet hall, and the guests were enjoying platters of roast lamb, fish, oranges, pomegranates, sweets, and spiced nuts. Sitara walked through the room, enjoying the sight of the fine dancers and the musicians performing, and the magicians creating wonders, and the poets reading their verses. No one recognized her, not even her own family, for she covered her face with her veil, especially the star on her cheek. As the entertainment ended, Sitara realized she would have to run in order to reach home before her family. She slipped out the door and ran as fast as she could down the steps and through the streets. She was in such a hurry, she didn't realize that one of the anklets had slipped off her ankle as she jumped over a horse trough. The next morning, one of the royal stable boys noticed the flash of diamonds as he passed the trough. Seeing the beauty and the delicacy of the jewelry, he took it inside to his master. When the prince saw the anklet, he was immediately enchanted. "The girl who can wear such an anklet must be beautiful indeed," he said. "That is the woman I want for my bride. But how shall we go about finding her in this big city?" "What does a man know as you know about women and their ways?" asked his mother, the queen. "Leave it to me. I will find the girl for you." The queen went through the city from door to door. In each house, she asked all the women to try on the anklet, explaining that the prince wanted to meet the girl who could wear it. But in every courtyard, hopes were dashed, as feet were too wide or too big. Finally, the queen came to Sitara's house. She offered the anklet, and Sitara's stepsisters and cousins were eager to try it on. Even some of her aunts declared that they were sure the anklet belonged to them. They oiled their feet, hoping to slide the tiny anklet over their large toes. But one by one, each woman failed to put on the anklet. Finally, as the queen was about to leave, Sitara left her corner. "Please allow me," she said to the queen. When she pulled the diamonds over her toes, it slipped up around her ankle and fit perfectly. The queen declared that Sitara was the girl that the prince had been searching for, and bade her at once to come to the palace. But before she left, Sitara handed her little blue jar to her stepsisters. "This jar has a pari, a good fairy, in it. You need only wish for anything," she told them. "I hope it brings you as much fortune as it did me." What the sisters did with the jar, however, must be left for another story. When Sitara entered the palace, she realized that the prince was the same man she had seen in the window the night of Nowruz. She tried to cover the star on her cheek, but he took her hand away. "No," he said, "your mark is a sign of beauty sent from heaven. It would make me very happy if you would be my wife." And so it was that Sitara and the prince were married. They had their share of good luck and bad, but they always had each other, and so they were happy. The end. I hope you enjoyed this story. I want you to meet our puppeteer now. Her name is Cecilia Cackley, and she grew up in Arlington. She went to Key Elementary School. So let's bring Cecilia out from underneath the table, and we can talk to her. Hi, Cecilia.
Hello.
Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
Can you tell the kids at home a little bit about how you make your puppets and how you design the set?
Sure. All the puppets in the sets were made from cardboard and fabric and a little bit of wire and some wooden dowels. Basically, I designed all of the characters and traced their outlines onto cardboard and cut them out. And then when I decided what kind of fabric I wanted to use for their clothes, I cut that out and glued it on top. And the dowel helps me control the puppet from underneath the table.
So when you're underneath the table, is it uncomfortable? Are you hot?
It's a little hot. It's all covered in black fabric so that I'm hidden and you can't see me, and it gets pretty hot under there.
So if there are kids who are interested in doing their own puppet show, what kind of advice would you give them?
You can make a puppet from pretty much anything you have at home. You can take recycled objects, you can take an old sock that's missing its match and a Sharpie and color some eyes on it, stick it on your hand, and start talking and making a character. Puppets can be made from pretty much anything.
Cecilia, you also have your own company called Wits and Puppets. Can you tell us a little more about that?
Sure, we're a new company that's building shows for children and shows for adults, and we're interested in telling exciting stories and sparking people's imaginations and creativity and getting people excited about puppetry and stories. So we're happy to be part of Book Bubble.
Well, thank you so much for being here today and for making all those puppets.
Thank you for having me.
We'd like to thank Wits and Puppets for providing the puppets, and we will see you all next time on Book Bubble.